like go with the flow, informal conversation, see where it goes, and yeah, just go with the flow. So I'd love to start with you guys just introing yourself, just a bit about who you are and what you do, and we'll go from there. Maybe starting with you, Harley.
So, my name is Harley Seelbinder. I'm 22 years old. I live in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I I help run a cleaning business in the town I live in, and I also go to industrial engineering school. And about 15 months ago, 16 months ago, I started this weekly podcast. It started with like an individual, just topic based podcast. Then it moved to an interview style, and now it might be moving back to an individual style podcast. But who knows? Maybe live streams, maybe not. Every day, it's a new channel of opportunity to learn. It's
Oh
like I
yeah.
have no idea what I'm
Big time.
doing. There's no like perfect formula or template, but every day I'm just learning. I'm using GPT to help come up with topics. I'm just
Nice.
I'm very thankful. I work with a team out in Bangladesh to do a lot of my content for me now. So now I can mainly focus on the mic and my life in real life. So yeah, that's me.
Heck yeah, dude.
Sick.
Heck yeah. Yeah, so my name's Nathan Wenke. I also study industrial engineering, and we both study at Western. And it's a unique degree in the sense that there's a component, it's called industrial engineering and entrepreneurial engineering. So they add on more of like the cost starting a business side, and those classes are the best. So those are really interesting. A lot of useful skills there, but mainly what I do is actually run a landscaping business. So we have about when we're full time, we got about 4 to 5 full time guys, and we do like retaining walls, patios, lawn maintenance, that kind of stuff. Nothing crazy fancy, but it's good work, and it gives me a lot of experience in the real world and dealing with customers, and it's pretty cool to be in classes and then have have so much of the content be just not real world based, and yet I already have that experience. So it's cool to see like
What a
what you actually
contrast.
are going to be doing. Yeah, what you're actually going to be doing versus what they say you are or what you're learning at school is quite the contrast. So
So you
but
saying that
okay.
university is so far, well, I mean, we call it university here, right? College over
Mm.
there. So you're saying that the stuff you're learning in college isn't translating to the real world? Is that what I'm hearing? Or
Yeah, I'd say for the most part, that's probably true. The reality is that the university can't keep up with how fast stuff is changing these days too. That's the other component. So,
wow.
Harley mentioned GPT, and I would say most of our professors, they might know what it is, but like they have no conception of what's coming down the road here. And just a quick example, like one of our professors, we're learning a software called Pro Model, and despite its name with the Pro, it actually is really horrible at modeling things. So, but because the professor is tenured and only has another year or so, he has no desire to go learn the new software that is relevant, that's being used in industry, because that would require him to actually, relearn how to do that kind of stuff. So there's a bit of an incentive structure problem there, and the real world is just different. I'm not saying there's no useful information. There certainly is, but a terrifyingly large amount of it is questionable in terms of its usefulness and relevance given the fast changing environment we live in. So I don't know. Harley has, I imagine, a similar experience because we talk about it a lot, but probably a little bit different. But
Yeah, it's like spend $2,000 to learn an outdated software that really is not intuitive.
it's
When in
rough.
reality, you could go to GPT, code me, or provide me the code for this. Or it's like we have to individually code this non-intuitive software from 2000, and it's like, wow, like we talk with our TA and we're like, so how do we solve this? And he's like, I have no idea. I don't use Pro Model in the real world. I use another software that's more intuitive. And you're just kind of like sitting there like,
That's funny.
wow, what an interesting amount of money I'm spending for this. Huh. That's pretty
Mm.
it's pretty exciting to hear, but no, yeah.
It's also almost like as well, like you have to with these, these bureaucracy and universities and whatnot. There's this separation between like speed and policy. It's like this policies are put in place and like this thing, and this thing. So if you were to introduce it to the university, they would be like, oh well, no, there's this policy or this standard or this hazard. So the turnaround time would be, years at least.
Yeah.
So that's huge. And I think also there's a big difference between principles and what would you call what's the word I'm looking for? Like principles meaning there's underlying structures for how you should do things, say for business, right? Like you need to have a business strategy, for example. Like maybe you don't, but I'm just using as an example. And there's a
Sure.
difference between like the application of those principles. So I feel like what's missing, like you're learning the principles, and I'd love to talk about industrial engineering.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That is so interesting. So industrial engineering, you said industrial entrepreneurship. Is that what you said as well?
So it's industrial and
Mm.
entrepreneurial engineering is the technical term for the major.
Right, right. Well, let's
Mhm.
unpack that. So what is involved in that really?
Sure, Harley, you want to start us off?
Yeah. So I guess I did a podcast about 4 weeks ago, maybe five, about what industrial engineering is. And I guess a good buzz phrase for it, what might be, is the engineering of business, how to make a business profitable and efficient and like how to improve the processes within it. And that's only like maybe one side of it. There's like a cost and financial analysis side, there's a simulation side. But I guess the overall theme is how can we look at the business as a whole and try to make the processes within it more effective and honestly at the end of the day make the business more profit. And so that's, I guess that's a summary, but
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
wow.
no,
Because
that was a
last
pretty good summary. Oh, go.
I was going to say, because last night, for the first time, and this probably makes me look like a bad business owner, but for the first time, I sat down. So I knew my incomings, I knew my outgoings, generally speaking, but I sat down and mapped out the man hours of the whole business. Like, what is it really taking my staff to do a
Yes.
video? What is it
That's
really
smart.
taking to do this? And for so long, like I was living in this delusional land. It was my ego partly and wishful thinking. And it's so interesting how those two come together as far as the mind and business. But I was always like pushing aside like, oh, I have this fantasy mind that it takes this long and then it costs this much and then I need this much, this many resources. But I broke it down, I'm like way off, like on how many hours I need
Yeah.
and then how much resources I'm using for my own page and like the profit percentage versus if I did my stuff, if I didn't do my went through the whole thing, right? And long story short, it was the most irritating feeling. This is like looking at yourself as well. This is like analyzing yourself by like, the decisions you make. Like, why am I where I am? It's like, oh shit. And this is huge confrontation. I had this moment last night. I was sitting down writing all these hours out and these like, asking my team, like, how long does it really take to do this? I'm like, they're like, oh, 3 or 4 hours. I'm like, so 3 hours? It's like, no, 3 or 4. I'm like, okay. I had to sit
that's
down and like
a bit of a
really
difference. Yeah.
yeah, to really confront it. And then this fantasy I had about, what it actually costs to run this business that I'm doing, is really, and it was confronting. And it's like, I was just all these hours. I'm like, okay, then I need a budget for someone to come on who's extra hours so we can edit in advance. And long story short, it was this whole process to go through. And I just kept feeling the urge to be like, no, don't add that on there. That's fine. We'll sort that out later on. I'm like, oh, I just sat there and put it in. I'm like, that hurts, that hurts. But now this feeling I have, it's like, that hurts, but it's like, now I actually know where I am. It's clarity, right? So, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, the numbers don't lie, which is good and bad as you've encountered. And it's one of those things like I'll notice myself sometimes I'll kind of put off the accounting or I'll put off like, okay, well, how much did that really cost me? And that's even coming from someone that like is familiar with spreadsheets, the numbers, the income statements, that kind of stuff. And it's tempting to do that, but if you don't know your numbers, you're not going to do well, period.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
you can, and this is the thing is it's like it's one of those like dragons under the bed. They're like, man, I don't want to really look at it because you want to be
Yep.
creating content or you want to be doing what you love. You want to be really running your business, but it's one of those aspects that you really shouldn't overlook. And I think it's one of the reasons that a lot of businesses end up failing is that it's something that's not paid attention to enough, where more time and resources should be allocated to make sure you're really paying attention to those numbers. That's interesting that you kind of sat down and you're like, man, I got to look at this, but it's important, right?
It's a life thing as well, man. Like
Yeah.
it's that those hard questions you're asking yourself around, and like one of those questions is, and this is I mentioned this on both the podcasts that I went on with you guys. Check out the podcast, by the way, for these guys. But I when I had these health issues that I was going through, there's there's a natural knee-jerk reaction, and I think that 90% of people have this, if not everyone, of being like, oh, this is happening to me, like, oh, like I'm suffering, like this health thing is occurring to me. And on some level it really is. Like, if you want to get really technical, something is happening to you. But the question that's empowering that I ask myself is, like, I really actually looked at myself in the mirror, quite literally, and I said to myself, like, what have I done to get myself in this place of where was likelier to happen, or it happened? And I just sat there. Like, I just sat there and thought, and I, over the days as it naturally unfolded through contemplation, I realized that I was experiencing this health issue, and I again mentioned this on the podcast as well with you guys, that I was being arrogant. Like, I wasn't trusting a person to look after my health. I was using, like, I know the answers, like this kind of, like, I'm intelligent enough to know the answers. I can read all these books. I can do this. And as soon as I realized that and I let it go, and I had someone who was outside of the situation, her name's Brooke, it is Brooke, and she spent the next 3 months with me. It was in December, and she's just pointing out little things here and there, like, I'm like, oh, I'm freaking out. I'm like, this is not working. She's like, it'll go up and down. It's okay. It's all good. It'll go up and down. I'm like, fine, whatever. Like, just being impulsive, and when you're in that state, and then lo and behold, and then it comes clear, and I become better and better each week. So the principle, like, the hardest thing about business, about life, at least, on a macro level, is just facing reality. like what have I done to get myself in a situation? Like, why is my staff, like, overworked? It's like, because I'm lying to myself about how long things take, So facing these realities, I think that sounds like what industrial, industrial
engineering is the easy way to put
engineering.
it. The umbrella term, industrial engineering.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Is partly about, right? Engineering being the sharp edges and the precision, as opposed to industrial art. It's just the business of it. So that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, no, for sure. That whole confronting reality thing, and then also specifically the psychology of, like, going through the ways in which you got yourself into that situation, whatever that is. It's hard to do, but it's the best way to figure out, like, how you're going to get out of that situation. And it reminds me of this play by T.S. Eliot called the Cocktail Party, and Jordan Peterson actually brought this to my attention, as he does many things. But it's about, essentially, this person is getting free psychological advice from a counselor that happens to be at this party. And this person comes up to this counselor and is like, hey, I'm really struggling in my life. I'm not doing well. And I'm hoping that it's my fault. And the psychologist looks at her and he's like, why would you say that? And she's like, well, here's how I see it. If it's my fault, I can fix it. I'm capable of changing the reality I'm in. But if it's the world's fault, if it's someone else's, if it's just I'm misfortunate, I have no ability to really change this. And it was a fascinating perspective that she actually wanted it to be her fault, because it's empowering then, and actually allows you to, in a more tangible way, change your situation. And it's a complete mindset shift from what I think a lot of people will think about in that way. It's a horrible process, kind of, to go through. How have I gotten myself in this situation? But at the same time, it's so therapeutic and necessary, and it really leads to the true growth. So I thought that was an interesting plan. It's cool that you've experienced that. Like, seriously, it's awesome.
It's a natural need. Like, it's, for me, like, again, the initial response is always like, like, let's just not look at that right now, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I've always for me, I always come back to like something's going wrong here, and something smells funny. It's like that when gas leaks, like they naturally put the smell in there so you could smell it, but something smells funny, and you're like, oh, I can keep ignoring it, but the next thing you know, like, when a match lights, it blows up the whole house because you've let the gas leak without doing anything, So it's doing a disservice to yourself, right? And yeah, I learned it the hard way many times over and over again. So yeah,
Definitely. Yeah, I was listening to this podcast just about an hour ago for the second time. Chris Williamson and Alex Hormozy. I don't know if you've heard of either of those names, but either way, yeah. He was talking about how, like, wherever you point the finger of blame, is where the power is placed. Like if you blame someone else for your problems, you've now given them all the power, because if you blame yourself and point the finger, you now are responsible for changing, and you actually have given yourself the power. But it's like, oh, it's my spouse's fault. Oh, it's the government's fault. Nope, the government now has all the power over you. And it's like the power of looking introspectively at yourself and blaming yourself and pointing the finger towards you because you're responsible for you. So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, well, and I think it goes even deeper than that. Like you can't. It's not even like oh, I'm actively blaming someone. It's like, where am I unconsciously, actively, inactively perhaps, or actively rather, blaming other people? Like, where am I doing that? Because like you actually have to uncover it, and it needs to be like a conscious process. And the more I talk about it now, I'm realizing small things where I'm doing that. And I feel like a lot of the friction in one's life, and I'm speaking for myself here, but I think it applies to a lot of people, is that unconscious blaming, or that unconscious, like, that person did something to me and they ought to fix it. And I'm gonna withhold certain emotions or feelings or experiences from them, so they perk up and they fix it, you know? And I think if you really look at it, it's like that happens a lot with a lot of people. That's where resentment really comes from, you know? And again, it's also like resentment's a defense mechanism, in my opinion. Like, it's a defense of like, hey, I won't stand for this. So it's a healthy emotion in the sense that like, I'm not okay with this, and there's resentment there, and I'm okay with it being there, which is a conscious acknowledgement of it. But I think also at the same time, if you look deep in that resentment, there are strings of this person needs to do something for me to be okay. So it's like, where are you not taking radical responsibility?
Yeah, it reminded me when you were talking about like the unconscious. It reminded me of Socrates, because his famous dictum, his famous quote was, "An unexamined life is not worth living." So he was all about,
So good.
yeah, I mean, he was all about just introspective, like, man, what are my motivations here? Why am I doing this? How much am I blaming other people for things? Kind of as you're hinting at. And reading Socrates, I mean, he's a highly recommend his writings.
He's a G.
Incredible. Yeah, he's top G. Great guy. But
The original top G.
yeah, no, really, like he's basically the first. So but yeah, that quote stood out to me, and it's in that same line of thinking, like, questioning your motivations, and then resentment too. It's a big box, so quite a big box, that one. But one thing that it does is, if you can learn to pay attention to when you're getting resentful, it's normally an indication that something needs to be done. So, because resentment, normally a conversation needs to be had, or you need to say something, or you need to do something, because resentment can grow and then it can turn into something not good. Um, so like using it as a signal for change, or using it as a signal for like, okay, maybe I need to update something here. That's kind of how I look at it. Because if you allow it to fester, it can get pretty dark. So I don't know. That's just my 2 cents, but yeah.
Yeah,
It's like the
go ahead.
All yours.
The power of like remote slap. Yeah. Like the tiny little lizard will soon turn into the giant dragon. More archetypal Petersonian language, but yeah, it's like
Petersonian.
If you don't slice
I love
it
that.
at the head right away, it's gonna grow. And so I totally agree. And honestly, like the times in my life where I feel resentful at someone, like I almost don't trust myself fully. Like, like I'm trying to imagine, like, if I'm really resentful at someone, it's like, if an emergency were to occur, I almost don't fully trust myself. I'm not like, I don't know, my words and actions might not align in an emergency. Like, I don't know, I might do something that I regret because I have all this pent up emotion, and like, I don't want to explode. And so like, yeah, the capacity for me to do something horrible, I'm aware of, but when I'm really resentful, like, I notice that could be way, way worse. And so I'm not always the best at like flushing out resentment, but I guess living with you, Nate, it's like we've had like a ton of experience living with each other and kind of just explaining like, yo, you did this wrong, or I feel annoyed at this, or, we meant it. It's occasional when we have to, but I think I've learned that just living with you for like 5 years, 4 years,
Yeah. And we've had this helpful. Yeah, we've had this rule, which has been very useful, and it was kind of a implicit rule before it was explicit. But I remember when we moved into college together, I kind of said it explicitly. And it was basically like, we're going to always tell each other the truth. Like, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's like, man, I don't want to hear this right now, we're going to do that to the best of our ability. We're going to try and do that.
Yeah.
And, we're going to fail, of course. And there's going to be times where it's like, well, I don't always know what the truth is. Like, man, I have all these emotions. I don't know what this is. But I remember one time, just for comical sake, I remember I was trying to go to sleep. I was like, man, I just can't sleep. And I remember coming upstairs and being like, all right, look, dog, I think I'm mad at you for something.
Oh yeah.
And we hashed it out, and I said, yeah, sorry, I'm stupid, and I think you said, yeah, sorry, I'm an idiot, and then we went our merry ways. But it's so huge, and in any relationship, whether it's romantic or just personal or roommate, whatever, that communication factor and that rule of like, we're going to tell the truth. I mean, man, dude, that served me well. So
yeah, it's also uncovering the truth as well. Like the truth exists, but it's like, how far down is it? Because sometimes,
because you don't always know.
Yeah, something's off. You're like, I know it's off, and like you said, there's a telltale sign of, I can't sleep. But sometimes you just don't know, and you're so used to living in condition. It's like, I love that. It's like, hey, I'm pissed off at you, man. It's like, what? Like, what are you talking about? Then you start talking about it, and something inevitably comes up. So even when you think there's nothing, like if you talk about it, and it's like, and it might sound cliche or a bit lame, but like it really opens your heart to people, and that capacity to just to bring it up, and and just say, hey, like I'm something annoys me about you, but I don't know what it is. It's like, then holding space for that. And I don't like the word holding space because it's very spiritual-esque, but holding space for that, being like, like, yeah, let's chat about it. And that natural trigger of like wanting to defend yourself, like, no, like here's what actually happened. No, come on, like let me show you why I am like it's fine. Like here's this, here's that, here's this. And like watching that thought process, like I had a conversation about 2 weeks ago where someone brought something up to me, like accused me of something. And I'm sitting there in the conversation, and I'm like, every part of me is just like, I'm not responsible for your emotions. I'm not responsible for your emotions. I just wanted to say it really badly. Rather than that, I'm just like, cool, okay, so what does that mean for you? And then I just kept asking questions. Then towards the end, the conversation, I just and the questions aren't for them. It's for me, actually, to create space. It's not like, it's two, right? It's both. But I'm creating space for myself. And then towards the end of the conversation, we came full circle, and we realized that there was something going on for that person that was, how would you put it? They'd felt X way, and in the end, that led them to believe that I was actively trying to do something against them, when I wasn't. Like, it wasn't even on my conscious thought process. Now we can get down the whole path of like, well, everyone has a dark side, and like maybe you were. It's like, but in that conversation, that was the reality of it. So, managing that conversation, and also on top of that as well, like speaking of, and I'm just going, all over the place here, but let's just flow with it. You mentioned always being truthful. What I see with truth, right? What I see is more important than telling the truth is letting go of managing perception, right? That's been a hard one for me this last 6 months. It's like 6 months, like, where am I telling the truth, but I'm telling in such a way that makes me look a certain way. Right? Like,
okay, yeah. Or I was just gonna say, or
go for it.
Go. Well, I'll quick let you expand upon that. But then it's like, yeah, you're saying something that might be like factually true, or like something that might be as true about myself. I'm doing this, but within the wrong environment, or the tone in which you say it, or the way in which you say it, it can be wielding it as as an ego tool, as something other than truth motivated by love. Because there's that love component too, of like, I want the best for you and you want the best for me. We don't want to just clobber each other with truths. If I went up to Harley and he's pissing me off, I'm like, actually, I think you're horrible. Like that I might think that at the time, but that's that's a horrible use of even my true emotion at the time. So I kind of cut you off there, but I wanted to point that out. So yeah, keep going.
Yeah, that's more the emotive function of it, in the sense of like, rather than like you're making me feel this, like, hey, I'm experiencing this feeling right now. And so there's an old acronym called STATE, STATE, right? How it's regularly spelled. And it's a way you approach conflict. And it's part of the book Crucial Conversations. And the first part of that is you state the facts. Like, so a fact is, you said X, right? You said X. then you tell the feeling, S-T, tell the feeling, that made me feel X, Y, Z. Like, that made me feel this way. So you said X, that made me feel X, Y, Z. So let's say, for example, you said you do the dishes, you didn't do them. That made me feel unseen, you know? And then the A is asking for their story. Like, what was your story? Like, what do you feel about that? I'm actually pull that up and show people, but I'll do it after
Sure.
I explain this. But long story short, when that's the emotive function, right? But what I'm talking about, like, as a man, right? One of our, I guess you say, biological drivers is status. Like, we do certain things for status, and that's what makes us attractive. So it's very easy to bend the words or bend sayings or bend, you know, perhaps who you are as a person to facilitate the growth of one's status. And that's what I'm referring to more specifically. It's like, hey, like, oh, not that anyone asks what your income is. Like, what's your income? And like maybe you add in things like tax refund, for example, or something like that. That's my income as well. Like that's the truth, but it's not the truth, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So I just wanted to say, like, because you mentioned, you know, always telling the truth. What I find more difficult is being truthful, being high fidelity, being able to speak directly to who you are. Integrity, which is your thoughts, words, and actions are aligned. To me, that's the harder thing to do than telling the truth. Because telling the truth, and perhaps this is even a deeper question, is the truth in the sense of like it exists regardless of you, or is the truth something that you speak and you determine? And if it's something you
Yeah.
determine, it's like, are you speaking to what the external truth is in that determination? And that's where I am talking about managing perceptions. I know it's a bit complicated, but with the managing perception part, for me, it's really important to like pause and be like, you know, what do you do for work? Oh, I work at Macca's. It's like, it's cool. It's fine. So that's what I was speaking to about the managing perception part.
Okay. Okay. Harley,
There's
do
a
you have anything
whole
else?
lot there.
Yeah, I bet. Harley, do you have anything, or I'll expand on something? Go for it.
The word gnosis. I don't know. It's another box, but it's along the similar lines. I don't know if you've heard of that. Gnosis.
No.
I've not.
Gnosis. It's like the Greek root word is like knowledge, but it's kind of like that feeling or smell or like that, you can almost feel when someone lies to you, or you can almost feel when there's resentment in the air. It's that smell factor that you were talking about, that gas leak.
The
I don't know. It's
gas.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just a word that I heard recently in one of my pods. And so I was like, huh, interesting, gnosis. And I've been kind of like looking at it. I GPT'd it just now, and it was kind of like
GPT'd.
religious or
GP.
philosophical insights. It can kind of seem like a spiritual or mystical situation, but
Yeah, I got it here on the screen.
kind of like
Gnosis.
Gnosticism is like
Oh,
another word that comes out of it.
Is it
Is this-
G or is it?
Gnosis.
Yeah, it's G.
Oh, I've seen this. Yeah. Knowledge of spiritual mysteries. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
one.
Which,
I love how
like,
they
you
give
could
the
say
Latin
spiritual,
root here.
but
That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the roots are interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
way.
Sorry. Carry on.
yeah, that's all I was pretty much gonna say. But it's like you can almost like sometimes you feel like a message, or maybe not a message, but you can feel the feeling something is going really wrong. Typically, I think you can normally notice when something's going wrong, like you can't sleep. I'm feeling this way. There's some kind of knowledge that I have, or
And
I
is
feel
that the
like
truth?
that maybe it could be maybe it's the truth. You were kind of trying to like split the truth up into two ways that I kind of already lost, and like I was kind of confused, but like it might be one of those. I don't know.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. It's tricky stuff. The point you made about, I mean, we could talk about truth for like an hour, which we could, but the point you made, the difference between like integrity and telling the truth, and how, I mean, they're both interlinked. But you brought up an interesting point, which is, the integration of your character, whether or not what you say and what you do are in alignment. And this alignment thing is almost harder than just telling the truth in and of itself. It's like the truth and truthful speech has to be nested within your individual moral character, and whether or not you're an integrated whether you're a person of integrity. And that makes it, you commented on this, it's like a whole nother level. It's almost like a meta level where it's not just what you say, it's within the context of who you are. And that does add another domain to it, because again, you could say something factually true, but you could say it in such a way that was egotistical, wielding it as a weapon. You could, in an argument with someone, I'm just kind of going on a limb here, but like in an argument with someone, like I mentioned Harley, or about Harley, like you can bash someone with black truths, with truths that like are not using them towards the good. They're using them in a way
Say
simply
black truths.
Yeah, and different people have different definitions of this word, black truth. The way that I look at it, at least the way that I would define it, is when the broad way would be like wielding truth as a weapon. Like when you're saying something that technically like is true, but is not what someone needs to hear at that time. So you could imagine a negotiation with your significant other in an argument. And you could imagine like, okay, I could rip them a new one. I could tell them all the horrible different things that I think about them in this individual moment emotionally. And that might be true emotionally, but that's not going to be productive for the conversation and actually conflict resolution as a whole. And in some ways, that's wielding your emotional truth as a weapon. That's not an integrated way to do so. So like that's kind of how I would look at that concept of black truth. I don't know if that made sense.
Maybe
Makes
kind of like
perfect
the
sense.
opposite of a white lie. Maybe that's why the word black was thrown in there. Kind of
Yeah.
like how sometimes lies can sometimes be effective and useful, even though you might be lying. It's a white lie versus a black truth. Maybe that's where the word black comes from. That's just a guess.
I think it's like if it's a white lie, it's a lie in the service of the good, let's say. Versus
Yeah,
if
yeah.
it's a black truth, it's a truth in service of your emotion, like you're the bad. Like you're just
Mhm.
you're not aiming at the good when you articulate whatever you're saying. If it's a black truth, there's one distinction. So
Yeah, well, I think that's a question of like you can't live inside of a logical box in life. Like there's, science wouldn't exist inside that box. And what I mean by that is like you need the mystical, you need the faith, you need the messiness of the wiggly reality as opposed to the sharp reality, so to speak, in a in a feeling texture kind of way to discover like what the truths are. So I think that there's so many like little things embedded in this, and we can unpack them, but there's a difference between truth and integrity. And I think also on top of that as well, you need to be able to explore and let yourself let go. And this could be a stretch here of that kind of rigid feeling of morality. Now, what I mean by that is like morality is, and I'm purely like I haven't explored this very much, and I'm just going to do it right now, right here. But like, I have a mentor who I see every single week who is a body psychotherapist, right? And the reason I'm seeing him is because a lot of the psychology works are very heady. They're very like changing your mind, mindset, CBT, that kind of thing. And what we do is more body based in the sense of like, for me, like my characterology and whether or not there's a science to this or not is irrelevant at this point in time, is rigidity, meaning that I think from the head and everything's got to fit into a box, and that colors my reality, right? For better or worse, in positive ways, and hence the light and the dark and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that my mentor goes through is he will actively try to break my rigidity by challenging beliefs in my reality. Like, so for example, like I have a conversation like, I need to do the right thing here, I need to do this. He goes, no, you don't. He goes, morality will kill you. And I'm like, what? And he goes, you're holding on to morality so much that it's actually blinding you from your natural, in my words, your natural reflex of what you do and don't want. So before you band-aid the solution with what's right and wrong, you ought to let it gush for a bit to see what color the blood is, right? That's a metaphor I just made up then. But so that was his approach, right? So and this is what I find, and I've thought about this for a long time. I watched the debates with Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, and I see and I didn't agree with Jordan Peterson for a long time, and I'm like, by a long time I mean for a few months, because I didn't really give it any light. But Sam Harris is like trying to again, very, very like broad. I'm being very broad here, and I'm happy to be challenged on it. But for me, the feeling I get from him, the feeling, right, is that he's trying to define reality through this box. Like everything has a box, and just because we don't know the box yet of what this thing fits into, then we shouldn't use religion or other things to then fill those boxes up. And then Jordan Peterson's argument is that we need the mystical, the faith-based stuff in order to get to that point, because no matter what, there's always going to be room for ambiguity, right? So yeah, I think that, you know, in that whole thing about truth and managing perceptions, all these things, we can speak about what's moral and what's right, but at the end of the day, how do you know who you really are if you don't pay attention to the natural reflexes of what it is to be human?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a, I can think of 10 different ways we could go there, or down 10 different roads. No, and the what's really important, to summarize what you said, is it's complicated. No, but like, no, it is though. And you're pointing out that like morality, integrity, truthful speech, it's all nested within human nature. And the fact that we're messy, and I think you used the term wiggly, which I thought was great. But we're not perfect. We're limited, and we're going to make mistakes, and our perceptions are tricky. And some of us are wired more intellectually and more heady. I think you and I are similar in that way. And some of us are wired more emotionally and more, they make decisions from the gut. And all of those differences play in to our perceptions. And it creates this fascinating problem of trying to navigate that with other people. And in the moral dimension, it becomes even more tricky. So I know, Harley, I know you would probably say, and we've talked about this before, you're probably more heart than head than I am, for instance. And that even
Yeah, maybe
affects
it's
the
more
way.
50-50 for me instead of like
Yeah.
80-20 or whatever the number might be. Maybe I'm 60-40. I don't know.
90-10.
But
Yeah.
yeah, seriously. Yeah, it's kind of funny. We just drove 2.5 hours over to Detroit to do a in real life podcast with two other guys.
Epic.
This
Today?
guy named it was like last week Wednesday, so 6 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy named Jarrett, I happened to find him through, I guess, a musical artist named Mike. He has a podcast. I've connected with him. I've met him twice now, but either way, he is like probably 95% go with the soul. Don't think. Why are you thinking? Just go. Just take the jump.
Go.
Take the leap. He's like huge into this spirituality. You'll feel it in your heart.
I know those types.
And I'm just kind of like, I hear it and I'm like, I resonate somewhat, but I still have to think about it. And it was crazy because the two of them were kind of more gut oriented and we were more head oriented. Like they were talking, they love Terrence McKenna and
I hear you, man. I hear you.
A few other people. And they were kind of saying, I don't ever like listening to Peterson. It's too much head. It's just crazy to like see the difference. But yeah.
And I secretly have, I think, well, not secretly now because I'm going to say it, but there's a bit of resentment for me, like when it comes to those kind of people, when they try to bring in the wiggly into reality and subject reality based on that. When I feel, I'm just realizing this now, like for me, like, so when someone like say star signs or, you know, astrology and things like that, and what's another example? Like, yeah, my intuition's telling me this, like, and I don't mind someone having intuition or believing in random things, whatever. But when someone tries to subject me to those non-factual beliefs, it really bothers me sometimes. So when you're saying that, the first thing that came to mind is like, there's a spiritual community. There's spiritual communities all around the world, right? There's one in Sydney, and this crowd for me, like, rather than being like, hey, like, you said this, and it made me feel like, again, I'll pull this up now actually because it's coming back to that. It's interesting how conversations come full circle. But so rather than like sharing their facts of like, hey, you looked at me, or like that's not a fact. Well, you said this to me, and it really hurt my feelings, right? Hurt my feelings. What's your story? You know, and encouraging testing. So rather than doing that, my experience with these wiggly types, that they're people that with the wiggly personality is they will feel something like, yeah, I'm feeling an off energy from you, man. I'm feeling this from you, man. And it's like they will they'll make that reality when it's not factual. And I've had that happen to me so many times. Like I had one guy at one point, I didn't think he's mentally well, but I was at this like this event, this quote unquote spiritual event in Sydney about 6 months ago, and he came up to me and he's like, I know what the accusation was, I forget now, but like I went to go hug him, like because as far as I knew, we're fine. I went to go hug him, and then he's like, no, don't touch me, because I know what you're doing, I know what this is going on, like you're doing this and this and this, and I'm like, what? And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like what? And for me, it was so far in my reality. And I'm sitting there trying to have a conversation. I'm like, so what? He goes, I can feel your energy, man. Your energy's off. And I'm like, are you sure that's not you feeling your own energy and then project that onto me? And he's like, no, your energy's off. Your energy's off. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, can you tell me what I've factually like done? Like, because no, it's off. Like, I'm like, honestly, and he's ucking up at me, like going off at me. And I'm like, honestly, like this conversation isn't going anywhere if you can't get to the actual situation of what's going on and express to me the specifics, because right now you're just feeling, and that's fine, but I'm not going to sit here and have this conversation with you around this. So I don't know where I was going with that, but long story short, like that's been experienced for me in the spiritual space, and that's why I really dislike that feeling of like I'm going to force my reality onto you, this wiggly reality that isn't objectively real. It's like you want me to hold that for you, and it just feels off sometimes. So yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting experience. Like, how do you respond to that? Yeah, because you can't even, it's like you're speaking different languages almost. Like you can't really have a conversation then. And if you can't, if they're imbuing you with certain things and then they're not able to explain it, and you're like, what? It's kind of a conversation killer, because you can't even establish a reality that you both agree upon. So
Even if they said like, hey, like, you know what, I'm really emotional right now, and what I'm going to say is like all over the place. There needs to be a yin and yang of
That
like,
would be good.
yeah, it's like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm messed up right now, but I'm just going to express how I feel. Is that okay with you? Yeah, go for it. Cool. I could have just sat there and listened to it, right? But I think that's the yin and the yang, right? It's like you need to have, because we all have emotions, right? And people, I think, who, I'll just speak for myself here, like are very heady based. It's very easy to just turn your emotions off. It's almost like you have this skill of like just turn off, because you just go straight into your head. So that situation, I just turned off. I'm like, cool. So then I became more heady. It's just like boom, boom, boom. Whereas if I wanted to be like a real swinging human being, so to speak, I might play the dualistic approach, which is like I'm gonna become really emotional as well. Like, oh, how dare you, da, 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 like, and just escalate the situation to the point of like,
yeah.
do you know what I mean? There's a chess match of, and it's so funny that I say chess match because it's a very heady thing to say. There's a dance, right? There's a dance of energy that needs to happen, and it's like sometimes when you're so heady, you tend to attract those wiggly types who almost like they're a shadow, like they want to dance with you and like, blah, blah, blah. Then you're like, no, da da da. They're like, blah, 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 blah. And it's like this weird kind of gunfire showdown or something. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really resonate with this.
Please
It's
tell
like,
us what's your experience has been.
Oh yeah, go.
literally this Jarrett guy. Like he opened up this dang box because I met him and he would just throw stuff at me like that didn't make that much sense, but he could feel like he could feel whatever he was saying, even though he couldn't have any evidence. I don't know. Just the other day he was like, I don't even resonate with your stuff anymore, Harley. It's like you're not even real anymore. And I was like, he's like, is someone else doing your content? And I was like, actually, yes. He's like, oh, I can tell because it's just not you, or he could feel.
Can I just
that.
add
And I
something
was
to
like,
that quickly?
interesting. Yeah.
This is my crux of the issue for me. Just quickly, I'll let you carry on.
Mm.
Is that when they like, let's say I am different, and okay, so I am different. I do have someone editing my content. It is different. The graphics that pop up on the screen are different. And
Oh no.
so what's your point? It's like it's almost like if something is different and it's not who they think, it's like this weird indirect way of saying you're not who I think you should be, and it's making me uncomfortable. The uncertainty of who I think you actually are is making me uncomfortable. Please go back to that previous version, and then there's a whole bucket of emotions. Like, is it envy? Is it, I've had that heaps before where someone's like, you have dark humor coming from a dark place. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay, fair enough. 2 months later, I was actually envious. So there's a whole kettle of fish there as well. But please carry on.
Either way, kettle of fish. That's a new one, but yeah,
I like it.
It's
yeah, that
Australian.
is good. Yeah, that's good. Either
Should
way,
get some water. I'm listening though.
no, yeah. I met this Jarrett guy, and then I just went through his entire Instagram and found all these like 6, 7, maybe 12 other people I interviewed, and they all reminded me of a similar like, I'm speaking from the heart. It's my truth at the moment. You can disprove it with science, but it's how I'm feeling right now. So it is true, technically speaking, in my own soul, or that kind of like vibe.
Yeah.
This,
It's a
and then
cult.
I'm thinking like, interesting. I could see how some of it can resonate with me, but like, I like to have some reality or some factual evidence, or I don't know. Either way, if I wouldn't have ever opened that box, I feel like I wouldn't have even realized that there was a people out there that are more
People.
soul oriented. Because of it, now I'm more like, I don't know, slightly open minded and maybe slightly more, I don't know, maybe they've rubbed off on me slightly, but either way, I used to be like insanely critical, like hearing someone like, what are you talking about? But like sometimes I'm just like, well, I don't even know if it's worth questioning because I don't even know if they have a full answer behind it. They're just kind of feeling it and saying it, or I don't know. But it's hard to tell with some people. Like some people, like you can dive into the exact reasons on why they're saying what they're saying. And it's like very rigid and structured, and other people very wiggly using your language. It's interesting the differences in people.
And it's also like a case of coming back full circle with the Alex Hermosi and Chris Williamson podcast. In that one, like they're saying, pointing to this direction, like that's what it is. It's almost like, if I'm that person, I'm very like rigidy in a way. I need to surround myself with those kind of people to A, understand them, and B, there's something there, right? There's
There
always
is.
something that we're missing. And like there is
Oh
something
yeah.
there that someone who is very logical needs. Like let's throw like a physicist or like a like a mathematician, full-time mathematician in that field, and they're gonna be like, oh, what? Maybe, who knows? But they need that because it balances you out, right?
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I remember. I don't mean to keep bringing it back to this guy, but
keep
like I
going, keep
showed
going.
Nate this account of Soul of Jarrett is the account.
yeah.
Like when I met him, he had like
Can we pull it up?
4,000 followers. Yeah, let me, if you want, I'll pull it up
Yeah,
for you, or
please.
you pull it up.
Please.
Yeah, whatever.
I
Let's
know this
just
person.
like,
I've heard of him before.
okay, you've heard of him. Interesting. But either way,
Yeah.
it's like I think he appeals to a specific audience of like,
I know the audience. I know the one you're talking about.
it's like the universe.
The first one. Yeah, wow. No, I've seen this guy before. I think I maybe through your page or something.
That's it. It's just like all these like, I don't know, like I feel it in my soul. It's not like he's not scientific whatsoever, but like he
It's very,
resonates
very
with
feminine.
tons of people. Yeah, and he said the majority of his audience is feminine or females, and I was like, how strange, because like 95% of my audience seems to be males, and it's just it's
Right.
crazy to see the difference. But I'm like 46,000 followers. I'm like, not bad, Jarrett. Not
41.
bad.
Yeah, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, 41,000. Yeah, but either way, that's about it. I'll stop sharing.
Oh, you're good. Yeah, it was interesting to meet a person, at least for me, that was like on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of the whole head heart distinction that we just made. Like we were two very different creatures. Now, we got along great. And, of course, we're not trying to disparage him at all, but it is interesting to notice that difference of like, wow, okay, this human exists and they're not like me at all. And we speak different languages, but you can still connect. And there's always the interesting point of like, you're always missing something and you always have something to learn. So talking to people that are radically different from you or just that look at things differently can be really useful. So I think that's great as far as I'm concerned. But the point that you made, Luke, is I think part of your point is like, that's great. But if you're approaching the conversation from two different like perspectives, or even like if they just imbue you with a certain reality or a certain truth and then aren't willing to explain it or aren't willing to like, unpack it, then it's like, I can't then have a conversation with you. So there's that danger of, if the conversation is had in the correct manner of like, okay, we're both, just to make a joke I make, we're both just apes with consciousness here. Let's try and figure this out. If it's done in that way, then it can be really good and productive. But if it's like, well, no, I'm feeling this, and that's who you are, and I know that, and like that's how I'm feeling this right now, then there just isn't, I don't know, there isn't much to go off of there. So
It's like it's pseudo awareness, in my opinion, in the sense that like if you were to inquire a bit deeper, you'd see that we have biases, right? We have ways of seeing the world that aren't 100% accurate. You know, like, so like intuition's great. I think we should definitely learn to listen to our intuition, but we should have intuition and be critical of the intuition as well. It's like a process it goes through. And what I'm seeing there is just like, this unlimited stream of consciousness that isn't filtered by any logic, right? And you need to use your logic like you need to use your intuition. You need to have both tools in your toolkit, in your proverbial toolkit. And it's when like, I feel this and therefore it's reality, as opposed to I feel this. Could I be envious? Could I have confirmation bias? Could I be experiencing an availability heuristic? You know, there's all these different factors that contribute to ways we think, because we are human and we need conveniences in our brain. If we had a limited stream of consciousness, in the sense of like knowing all data that came through our mind, we wouldn't be able to function. So there is that inherent in us. And it's when someone isn't willing to acknowledge that, or rather doesn't even acknowledge that. They're meta acknowledgement of it. So yeah,
the meta. No, I hear you.
So yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like in this community, like and it's so funny because I'm there at those events and I'm like, there's something there for me, right? And I'm there at this event and they're like all meditators, all like, I did some ayahuasca last weekend, like all this kind of stuff. And for me, I'm just this like really logical person, and I'm having to like let go of that because I don't make sense to them. Like I'm like, oh, I see this happen. So oh yeah, cool. Like, whoa, like, so I'm just having to let go. Like, and I'm doing like static dancing and like just releasing my body and all this weird, not weird, but all this interesting stuff. And it just puts me in this another dimension. So, yeah.
No, it's cool. Like going outside your comfort zone in that environment's huge. It opens up parts of you that you didn't really know existed. And one thing I've always kind of, I don't know if I've necessarily scoffed at meditation, but like it's kind of like meditation. Yeah, like it. I don't know. I feel like it was imbued with a certain amount of like weirdness associated with the term for me for so long that I was just like, all right, I'm just not even gonna try this out. You know, it was almost like it was relegated to weird people that smoke too much weed, that kind of thing. But then I think when I heard from Sam Harris, like when he described he's a whole meditation app. And
yeah, I use it every morning.
Yeah, he just went huge down that rabbit hole. And hearing from him talk about it has been fascinating. And I will admit I have not dived into it as much as I need to. But it's one of those things where someone as heady as Sam Harris, I mean, he's like the definition of like pure just intellect, rationality, logical, all the way down until Peterson pokes him a little bit. But beyond that, to hear him go so far down the meditation train, and even that's so fascinating to me. So there's so much to learn. A lot to learn.
There is. And I wanted to ask you guys, what is some of the things you guys are tackling with at the moment from, it could be a theory, it could be something that you've learned recently. Like what's on your consciousness right now, or, as of recently?
I got something, Harley, if you don't.
Go in.
Okay. So this gets fairly personal, but that's good because that means it's more real in a sense. So right now I'm actually getting a minor in philosophy at Western at university, and I like philosophy, I do, but one of the problems is that you read all of these incredibly smart, effectively geniuses of their time. and they all have very convincing arguments. And a lot of them are not commensurate arguments. They are arguments that directly contradict each other / cannot be they're mutually exclusive. So one of the problems that you encounter when you come from a fundamentalistic religious household like I did is this problem of where do your own beliefs stop, and then how much of your own beliefs have been influenced by your parents' beliefs and your culture's beliefs and your community's beliefs. How much of what you think is really you, and how much of the influence from your culture, your family is good and necessary. Like, how much should we keep and how much should we update, get rid of, all those kind of things. And I mean, I think this is more of a process that that most people in their 20s go through. So I don't know if it's necessarily overly unique to me, but I'm also the person that is so heady that I feel like I have to have everything figured out, especially in the religious domain. So one of the issues that I'm encountering is I may be oversaturated in material such that it's almost having a paralyzing effect where it's too much information and too many different thinkers that for someone like me that really struggles to like live in like have a version of reality that I can get behind and not be freaked out by, which sounds a little strange, but to be constantly poked at my fundamental axioms. It's a Peterson term, poking people in the axioms. That's what I was referring to with Sam Harris. But to be constantly doing that, it's a bit too chaotic for me. And I'm someone that likes order. So I'm trying to deal with the problem of too much information that's useful and good, but too much at one time that you're not able to unpack isn't. So that's just something on my mind recently is you can actually overdo that. And I'm wondering if perhaps I'm dabbling in that. So
I wonder if is it the information itself that's overloading, or is it rather I think you mentioned it there pretty much, which was that there's too many conflicting, challenging beliefs that are challenging your infrastructure, right?
Yeah, so it's not that I've consumed a lot of information at once. I think it's the gravity of the information in terms of like how deep the philosophical claims go, then and just how complicated it is and how dense it is. That so it's both the fact that there's some contradictory things, there's different thinkers from different sides, but it's also just the depth of the information that you're getting into the fundamental questions about reality, and that's good, but you can overdo it and you can end up in too much chaos. And a lot of people, though, the flip side of this is a lot of people just don't even do it at all. So it's an interesting balance between I'm challenging my belief structures, I'm investigating this more, but I don't want to fall off a cliff. So I think it's good, though. It's a good process.
Almost like you need to microdose the philosophy as opposed to macrodosing it.
Yeah. Yep. There's a good way to distinguish it. So yeah, that's what's going on for me. What about you, Harles?
Yeah, it's interesting, Nate. I felt the same thing taking the philosophy. I feel like a little bit slower might be the best. The microdoses, Luke said. Yeah, that's true. But I guess the thing I'm wrestling with is a personal thing as well, which is I work with my mom, and it's an interesting dual relationship / triple relationship I have with her, which is she's my boss / colleague, and then also she's my mom, but I'm 22, and then she's also my friend. And it's an interesting, how, I've actually gone to counseling recently with her and just about it, and actually figured out some interesting strategies of so we would communicate through text, but then the text would be, hey, nice to see you, son. I love you. Oh, can you make sure to do this and this and this? Oh, emergency. We got to make sure to take care of this. Oh, here's a picture of the dogs. But and then maybe I'm kind of overdoing it, but it would just be personal work, blah, 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 blah. And jumping from that to that was just honestly kind of insane. So then past 5 months, maybe I've given her like specific time blocks. Like, okay, during this block, it's work only. During this block, it's personal. And it's made it a little bit better. And she's respected it quite a bit. But then we came up with another strategy, which is, how about instead of texting me work, how about you email my work email, any work related instance? If it's a huge emergency, you can call me. But like, I don't want to see texts from mom and it all be work. Like, I even changed the contact name to Kelly Seelbinder, my mom's name, because I would like, it just, honestly, it's just truly a weird place to be. Like, I'm unbelievably grateful. I have a flexible, well-paying job that allows me to really funnel a lot of resources and time into this podcast and into school and whatnot. It's like, it's taught me so much about business, so much. And so it's like, honestly, really great. But there's just negative consequences of like, my relationship with my mom was like almost a relationship that I didn't even want, like like I just didn't want it, even though I should want it because she's pretty great overall, caring, loving, whatever. So like, I actually went to counseling with her, and just me and her and a counselor, and he explained this interesting analogy, which is, I found pretty interesting. So there's a book called Men Are Like Waffles and Women Are Like Spaghetti. And I like Nate's face.
That's
That's very
hilarious.
funny.
Oh,
But either way, so women have like 10 times as many connections between the right and left hemispheres of their brain. So that like men have, I don't know the exact number, but the example was 60 and 600 connections. Men have way less, women have way more. And
Interesting.
so for men, like when they're actually trying to think of things through different topics, or like one topic to another topic to another topic, it's like you don't do it as quickly as a woman might. Women are actually technically better at multitasking. Like men, when they're trying to absorb information of different topics, it's like syrup going over a waffle. Like, okay, you're jumping from one section, okay, and it takes a little bit of energy to jump to the next, and then more energy to jump to the next. And as I was jumping from work to personal to work to personal to work, it would be exhausting, and I would actually get very frustrated. Like, oh, I thought we were just trying to have a meal of personal, and now we're jumping to work, and now it's just, whereas women are like spaghetti, that's kind of more interconnected. Like, they can easily jump back and forth without as much of an effort required. And honestly, that's been like the past week, my mom is like kind of took that to heart, and like is like, we're going to talk only personal, we're not going to mention work whatsoever. And like, she's done that, and it's been like, I'm like, oh, I actually like being around you. And so it was really, that's what I'm wrestling with, and I see an optimistic end. But man, that's what I've been working through.
Well, it comes back to that age-old question, like, can you do business with family, with friends? Can you mix them together? You know, like, I've had some own experiences with that. And, you know, a wiggly person might say in the context of this conversation, you should have boundaries, man. You have boundaries, you know. Like, just put a boundary up, you know. But it's like, what does that even mean? Like, I know what it means, but what does it really mean, you know? And then also, like, it's, yeah, can you even do that? Like, can a relationship, and I'm not saying you can or can't, I just don't know. But like, if you're saying relationship as something else and then it turns into something else, like, can that happen in the sense when money's involved and like tangible things like that are involved? I wonder. What do you guys think?
It's hard. It's not an easy negotiation. I think Harley's done it pretty well overall. But you would also, not to talk for you, but you would also say, like, long term, it would be tricky to stay here long term. Would that be
Possibly
true?
Yeah, that's true. That's actually why I'm trying to honestly do this thing, which is my own thing. Like, seeing you and Jordan have their own businesses and doing their own thing, not
He's our
connected
other
to their
roommate,
mom.
by the way.
Yeah, either way, he runs a shoe business and a lot of other things too. But it's like,
Nice.
pursuing this, it's like, it's allowed me to like feel a sense of independence, even though all of my income comes from the work I do for the family business. It's like, my goal is to one day be as independent as possible from it. But like, I don't know, there's also the other argument of like, a family dynasty. Do you want to keep it going? If using the power of industrial engineering, could I document all the processes within this system that brings in a bit of money, and then hire other people to do it if the processes are documented perfectly or as perfect as possible. And so that's like, I see that as a route where it's like, I wouldn't mind still being a stakeholder and then having other people
Stakeholder.
do a majority of the work. So yeah, so it's really a huge debate. Maybe I take a real engineering job. Maybe I keep doing this pod. Maybe I keep working at expert. Maybe a combo of one or two. It's hard to know, but for now, it's like the most logical decision is to just stay for now.
Yeah, man. It's tricky. It's tricky. What unless you got something, Luke? Sorry.
No, go for it. Go for it.
I was gonna ask you the same
Yeah,
question.
what's
Like
on your-
what's on your mind these days? What's the next big thing or thing on your mind?
Yeah, man. I think that you know, for so long I've had like a how do I explain it? It's like being waken up for the first time because for so long my mind was dulled by inflammation, so to speak.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's just the weirdest thing ever because I was living, but I wasn't living. Like I was kind of like floating around, and I was still doing the business and running things and all that kind of stuff, but I wasn't there, you know. And it's just like for the first time in a long time. It's always up and down, but for the most part, it's reached a point now where I wake up in the morning, I'm like, wow, like I'm alive, like I'm here. And I'm, you know, so it's almost like I've been reborn again in a weird way. And it's like, what do I want to do with all this energy I have? What do I want to do with, you know, who do I want to be? Like, I can go to the gym again, like I can start training again. I've been training like 5, 6 times a week. So I'm like, whoa, like, this is fucking awesome. And it really like made me think like, you know, when I was feeling that crappy way, I'm like, oh, I'm so unmotivated. It's like when anyone feels like this, they wouldn't do anything. So you know, I kind of thought about the motivation thing, which is another story. But yeah, so I'm kind of like in this new era of my life where like I've quite literally the dishes have been washed, so to speak, and everything's all clean and sparkly, and like they're ready to use again. It's like, what do I do with this now? So it's not a specific challenge, but rather, I guess, you know, the challenge is always the business. It's always like, and that's what I'm doing right now. It's like, you know what it is actually? Yeah, this is what it is. It's the most recent one that's come off the back end of the health stuff. Just took me a while to discover it. It's so I have, you know, my business is doing content for people, and I've got, I don't know how many clients now, somewhere like 9 or 10, maybe a bit more, all doing different things and whatnot, and it's growing, it's going well. But I have a choice now. Do I, you know, I'm doing the podcast here with you guys right now, and this needs to be cut up. This needs to be YouTube clips and thumbnails and time investment. So to sit down last night, I'm sitting there and at my lounge, and I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, this is how much profit I bring in if I don't do my own content. And the profit margins were sitting at about 50%, around 50, 51%, which is really good. I'm like, that's perfect. That will get me like the life that I want. I can do some things in my life that are like awesome. Like, fuck yeah. Like, that's really cool. Then I add my stuff on, the profit margins go down, like to a point where it's like, I'm comfortable, but I'm not like, I'm not living that life that I've always dreamed about, so to speak. So I'm sitting there thinking to myself, and this is like the part of me that like loves to live in the chaos, right? And like this week, like money came through, and straight away I just spent it all on sales. Like I just put it all into sales, like getting leads, all these things. And I had like zero money in my bank account. I'm like, this is great. But it's just, I feel like home. I know it sounds weird, but I feel like home. It's like, because I've always lived that way in a sense of like just investing money back into something. Like Grant Cardone style of stuff. Like, no money bank account. It's like, I didn't even think I was doing that. I wasn't trying to be like him. I just did that naturally. So my challenge at the moment is like, I'm sitting there and I've kind of decided what I want to do already. Hence why I'm on this call with you guys right now, this podcast, or whatever you want to call it, live. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, I could have this life that I want. I can move into this new place. I could do these things, X, Y, Z. But no content for me. Like no content for me, at least for a while, for 3 or 4 months. That's the, you know, long-term approach as far as like, if I'm an accountant. Then the artist inside of me and like the, you know, like the part of me that wants the chaos and wants the personal brand out there, and I guess the ego of like being out there and all this content being done properly is like, no, let's go for like hell for leather, as they say, like just fucking do it. And I kind of decide on that, but that's a challenge for me at the moment is like the balance of running a business and being realistic and being like a child and following my dreams and, you know, for the longest time, I've always been like 9 to 5 job, like this much is coming in, this much goes here, very like, you know, rigid in a way and very logical in a way and very like disciplined. There's a part of me that just wants to like just have fun and like do what I want to do and fuck the money. And that's where I'm at right now. So I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer, but I think both are right and they're both wrong. So yeah.
Tricky balance. It is so tricky. Like, man, kind of gotta eat, but I also like really like doing this. You know,
Yeah.
it's tricky, man. No, it's interesting to hear.
And the potential for a personal brand to hypothetically maybe even allow you to eat much more than any content creation for others could ever do, possibly later down the road with the consistency and the grind and the
It's high risk. It's I like it's basically the question is fundamentally on a scale of 0 to 10, how much risk do I want to take on? The threshold might be like 8, and you know, we're sitting at like 5 or 6, like, oh, this is so nice. Da-da. Now it's like an 8 or 9. It's like, okay, I gotta like really figure this out now. But you know what? Actually, no, I've kind of made my mind up. In fact, I have made my mind up, hence why I'm here right now, like I said. Whereas like I'm going to just like prioritize sales, go sales heavy in the business, and also at the same time just keep hiring and just take the risk. Like, what's the worst that's gonna happen? Like I get a job. Like it's not that hard. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's a lesson for life for those listening as well. It's like, you know, what's your tolerance for stress, for neuroticism, so to speak, and you know, can you push that threshold a bit? Because if you want to be like an entrepreneur or do business or whatever, there's no reality in where, at least from what I can see, I've done one business in my life, so to speak, but you need to be able to, as far as I'm concerned, have a high threshold for adversity. Like there was times over the last couple of months where I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my staff. I don't know what I'm going to do. I lost like 3 clients in one hit. I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm like, oh, I'll figure it out. I just figured it out, and things just came through. And it's just like living in that stress is just, it's painful, but it's also like the best feeling in the world. I don't know if you guys watch the UFC on the weekend. Do you guys watch UFC?
Nah, not typically.
not as
So
much.
this fighter, Israel Adesanya, he fought this guy 2 times in kickboxing. He then went to the UFC, like smashed everyone in the UFC, became world champion. Then this guy followed him from kickboxing because he's like, well, this guy did it, and he beat him in kickboxing twice. Contentious. Anyways, he followed him in the UFC, like fast tracked him to the title shot with him. This guy Israel Adesanya, is then winning the fight. He's like winning the fight on points. He's killing it, crushing it. And the last, like, I think it was 2 minutes of the fight, this Alex guy who'd followed him, like basically like he's just hunted him through the division, just hit him with a hit, and like he was against the fence, he was moving, but he was kind of knocked out. So then the ref stopped it, right? Now here's the cool part. So he's lost 3 times to this guy. 4th time now he's fighting him. 2 times kickboxing, 1 time in UFC, mixed martial arts. And he's in this fight. In the second round, he plays possum, which is like you pretend to be on the ropes, like getting fucked up, basically. He then comes back and then hits him with this hook. He then, startled, hits him again, hammer fist, beats him. And in the end of the fight, the post-fight interview, he's talking on there. He's like, I hope everyone in life feels this feeling of like, I've gone through this adversity over and over and over and over again, but now I've won. And he goes, and I keep winning, and da-da-da, and he's went on this like really inspirational rant. I can maybe show the video here, but I think it might be copyrighted. The point I'm making, though, is that like severe stress, severe trauma, severe pain, severe bad experiences, they like, it's like a ball. They add up inside this ball, and then when you hit through that fucking threshold, it bursts. And next thing you know, like you're experiencing all these fucking amazing emotions. So it's like, would I trade all those stressful times just to feel neutral? It's like, no. So that whole experience led to this like breakthrough moment of like, whoa, look what I'm doing. When I'm just sitting looking at sunset, I'm like, did this happen? Did this just happen today? So that's a good perspective to take on board, I think.
That's great, man.
No, seriously. Nothing worth doing comes easy in some sense. It's an interesting way of looking at it. And the other thing is like I tend to do this too. It's like, oh, okay, once I do this, I'll be happy or I'll be satisfied. Or once I reach this goal, then I'll be good. And it's just not about that. It just isn't about reaching the number. It isn't about reaching the goal. It's about the journey to that goal. And
It's cliche, but it's true.
it is true. No, it's one of the truest things I've learned. So, but yeah, on the entrepreneurial point, you do have to have a high threshold for stress and
Risk
negative
taking.
things and risk and like, I don't know. My biggest thing is like the amount of like the equipment we use. This is more niche for me, but like the equipment we use is really expensive. So like we get fairly large loans to purchase it. And
For landscaping?
yeah, for landscaping, mowing, the trucks, the trailers, it just adds up. And it's I told my parents how much debt I'm in the other day, and they looked at me and they're like, "You're crazy," and I'm like, "Well, I'm all in." So talk about a good motivator.
Skin in the game.
You're saying you had $0 in the bank. Go, hey man, it's a hell of a motivator. So and that doesn't mean the flip side of that is like don't be stupid. Don't be dumb. But you need to have a little bit of that, like a little bit of motivation there is good. So anyway, it's kind of
You're not wrong, man. Like all the big changes I'm making, like the changes I make in my business right now is because someone said to me like, "Hey, I decided to leave because this happened." I'm like, "Oh, what have I done to cause this?" It's like, "Oh shit, I missed this, I missed this." So it's like rather than being like, "Oh, that's an option," now it's like I need to do that, and that was painful. It's like fuck, like I fucked up. I'm a bit of a failure here. Like I've let someone down. It's like, and what can I learn from this? So it's just like it's like I think business is the most spiritual game ever. Like it just forces you to look at your shit and like, are you a good leader? Like, no, I can be like this. I can become frustrated with people. And like you go from like this spiky person, like up and down emotions to like, or like where things happen. It's like chaos is happening around me and you're like a little bit up. You're like, oh, okay. And like bad conversations are less stressful. It's the weirdest thing ever. And it's the same in life as well. I mean, but just business magnifies it, right? So,
Oh yeah.
but
yeah.
yeah, I think this has reached its natural end. We can wrap up and yeah. Any final thoughts? Feel free to plug anything you want to plug.
Harley, Harley Seelbinder podcast. No.
Harley Seelbinder podcast, life-changing clips, 3-minute morsels. No, I'm just kidding, but yeah.
No, you're not.
No, but seriously,
But no, I'm
guys,
not.
like those clips, they're fucking awesome. And the content, you guys literally, I was on the call here at the start and your video, Nate, popped up. The new video editing is amazing. So check out
Yeah.
these guys. It's good stuff, but please carry on.
It. Yeah, or not. You go.
I don't know. I'm one. No. Just Harley Seelbinder podcast. Come check me out. I see a guy joined in the chat. Welcome.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
see
Look at that. Our chef
Uh,
Hamari. He joined in Nate's live stream,
Hey.
and so
Oh, cool.
well,
So-
hello. He's been following along for like, I don't know, 25 minutes, honestly. So, but either way. Oh, and another
didn't
guy.
even see
Okay,
that.
that's you. But yeah.
Yeah.
And then Nate.
Yeah, Nate Wenke podcast on all the things. Yeah, trying to make sense of this world. If you want to come along, it's gonna be a wild ride. So, thanks for having us on, Luke. It's been fun, seriously. So
This is
good time.
great. I love this. I
Yeah,
love
we
live
should do
streaming.
this more. I'm in. Yeah.
Whenever you want, guys. Like, it just feels like a conversation. There's no stress here at all. So
All right.
sweet, gravy. What else is there? That's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed. Send love, send happiness, and we'll see you guys later. Peace. Just feel it in my heart. I feel it in my chakra.
Back to those
yeah.
feely people.
Thank you,
Oh,
guys.
it's purring.
I know. I'm just sensing
Oh,
a bit
man.
off here at the moment. All right, lads. Pleasure. I'll see you guys later.